finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
All right, welcome to this week's show. We're really excited to have some friends of ours with us that we're going to interview today. Unfortunately, their family was struck by the tragedy of a fentanyl overdose in their 18-year-old son, Tanner, just a few months ago in October of 2020. They have graciously agreed to discuss this and bring kind of the personal side to what we've been talking about in previous episodes with regards to the opioid epidemic. So we'd like to welcome Keith and Charmin Reister. Great people. We've known them for actually going on decades now.
Yeah.
Kids went to school together and so forth. And I think to start off, tell us about your son. Tell us about Tanner.
You want to go ahead?
Well, yes. One thing about Tanner that I just have always looked up to, he taught me, is he loved fiercely. He loved his friends. He loved his family. He loved people that were hard to love. He did not hold back anything when it came to that. And it didn't matter. He would give you the shirt off his back if he only just met you. That's just something that he has really taught me as his mom. Like, I am not very good at that. And as a young kid, he just always loved everybody and always encouraged me to welcome some people that maybe I didn't really want in my home, but Tanner loved them and would say, "Mom, they don't really have food or they don't have a great family life. Can you bring them? Can they come over?" And then we had kids, random kids at my house all the time because of Tanner.
Yeah. He was he was our most challenging child, I would say. We have four. He was the second. He was born in 2001. And growing up, he was always great. And junior high kind of got rough for him. Like, it was a challenge. And we were just trying to figure out how to kind of do the best that we could. I remember even into high school getting him into counseling because he felt like he was angry, and the counselor told me, he said, "He's not angry, he's just always right, and so you're going to kind of have to deal with that. Like, he doesn't like being told what to do. He's a natural born leader." And it was, honestly, we knew that he was, we did have struggles with Tanner, particularly just, he liked to smoke weed. And he was pretty honest about that. And when he was 17, we kind of came to a head and gave him some options, and he decided he wanted to move out. And he did. But we maintained relationship throughout that. He still cared about his family, and one of the things that I learned about Tanner, especially after his passing, was just everybody knew that if they needed something, they could go to Tanner. Tanner would always be there for people. He would always take care of stuff.
So to interject,
yeah.
So his drug of choice was not opiates.
No, he was. He really liked smoking weed and would tell us that, and would argue with doctors about why the medical benefits of it, as we went through stuff, because Tanner also had suffered a bit from some depression and some things like that had and he basically said, when I don't feel good, that makes me not feel that way anymore. But no, opiates weren't his choice. And we actually had a conversation with him about, he came to us to talk to us about use because he had a friend who had passed and some friends who had overdosed, and just said, we were doing this stuff and I don't like it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's scary. And so that was definitely not the sort of thing. And even talking with his friends after he passed, they were in disbelief that he had done that. Like, it just didn't make any sense to them.
Yeah, like I think for a lot of my, May and I's physician colleagues, kind of the sense we get, or at least what we had initially. I mean, we've been doing this for almost 30 years. And so when there would be an overdose, it was usually an escalating event. So people would start, their drug of choice might have been, marijuana, or more commonly alcohol, or something would happen. They'd go to a party, then they'd like, oh, meth is really great. And then things would just continue to escalate. And you could kind of see this trend line. And I was like, man, if we don't, if there's an intervention here, or this person decides to change their life, it's going to be, a tragic consequence. But that's not really what you're telling us.
No, I mean, you could probably speak to that too. That is not, we did not see any evidence of this. We would not have even known that Tanner had tried it had he not told us that he and his friends had tried it. It was not something that we saw. I mean, I have had friends who were addicted to prescription pills, and you knew that they were. I mean, it was something that they did. I never saw any of that with Tanner. I mean, I've seen him high on weed, but that's different than kind of the opioid thing. And so that was not something that he was interested in. And to be honest with you, even his drinking was social. Like, it was friends at a party. Like, that's when he did that. It wasn't something that he that it was really a thing that he was into that much. I mean, he had kind of his one thing that he had found that kind of helped with when he was feeling bad. And
so in a way, it was more of a like self-medicating.
He was absolutely self-medicating. That was a conversation that him and I had because I had been taking him to a doctor that had diagnosed him with depression. And at one point in his life, I think he was probably 16, maybe 17, she had put him on, I can't remember what it was, but she had put him on an antidepressant. And he had told me, he's like, Mom, this is the first time I feel normal. Like, I feel like a normal person. And I was like, that's awesome. Well, then at one of our next appointments, he admitted that he was smoking pot. And so she told him she could not prescribe him these meds because they couldn't go together. And when he was off of them, he was a different person. I mean, he was very different. And I had asked him about the marijuana, and he said, well, it makes me not feel anything, and I don't want to feel what I feel.
So I'm curious, I'm just curious about how, the choice in choosing the marijuana over the prescription medication, or how long had he tried the prescription medicine for?
He was probably on it for maybe a year, I would say. Like maybe 6 months to 8 months, maybe a little less than a year.
And taking it with friends.
Yeah.
I mean, that had been, there was a guy who kind of brought it in, and they were using them together. They were taking the what we think he thought was oxy.
No, I meant
prescription.
I meant the prescription.
Yeah.
The prescription
antidepressant. Sorry.
Yeah, he was on them for probably, I would say, 6 to 8 months, somewhere in there. Like, a little less than a year he was on them, and he felt good when he was on them. But when he was honest with the doctor and she pulled them, and then he could no longer get them, I think that's when that's when the marijuana just kind of took over. And those were his exact words. I don't want to feel what I feel. And when I smoke the marijuana, I don't feel those things.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point, and I really want to emphasize this for my physician colleagues. And I'm going to call BS on it in a huge way, because we used to do this to young women all the time. Back when we thought that you needed a pap smear every year, that's since changed as guidelines have changed, and, different data and whatnot. But it was like, you can't refill somebody's birth control pills unless you see them every year and they get a pap smear. And I'm like, okay, so what you're telling, I used to get so mad at my nurses. I'd say, no, fill the damn prescription. And this is why. Because a pregnancy to a 17-year-old is orders of magnitude more dangerous than if she misses a freaking annual exam.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fact is, is that you take, like, I'm guessing. You can tell me if I'm wrong. So he was probably smoking way less weed, but he was smoking weed while he was taking the antidepressant. But he was actually feeling decent and functioning well.
Yes.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, why is that bad? you know, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's not like, geez, Mom, I only feel good if I round up the neighborhood cats and sacrifice them to Satan. It wasn't really kind of that level of activity.
No, it wasn't. And to be honest with you, he quit a bunch of times because he had gotten some MIPs, and so he was being drug tested at the school, and so he just stopped. But I think that he stopped because he was being tested, and I think that some of this pill use came up during that time when he stopped with that, when he was being tested, because it wasn't really showing up. His friends were telling him this doesn't show up. And
right, which is, what we had discussed in a previous episode, which was the whole point of a lot of the novel psychoactive substances is they're so new, they don't show up.
Right.
Like,
right.
Like carfentanil, it's rhino tranquilizer. We don't test people for rhino tranquilizer routinely. And then you get into the, spice and K2 and bath salts and all that stuff. And it's like, God only knows. We don't even know what they are.
Yeah. How do you test for it?
So how do you test for that? So you think that in some respects, he got a taste of feeling, quotes, normal. And then that changed, obviously.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then that, reasonable to say that might have potentially escalated some of his other experimentation.
Yes.
Yeah. And
I believe so.
Yeah.
I have a lot of, obviously, as a mom losing a child, I have a lot of the what if and the regret. But that is one thing that I wish maybe I would have fought for him a little bit more, because I didn't see him. Smoking pot just wasn't that big of a deal. Like we had said before, it's not going to kill him. If that's what makes him feel better, it's not keeping him. He's not hurting anybody. He's still functioning. I just wish I would have fought for him a little bit more, because he did get a taste of, I feel really good. And then that was taken away from him. And now here we are.
And when he, and this was all kind of led up to him deciding to move out of the house. That was in June of 2018. I can't remember exactly the year it was. It was right before his senior year of high school. He just, following the rules was just too difficult for him. And he wanted to be able to do what he wanted to do and not have anybody going through his stuff, which we were doing. We were scared in a way. We knew that he'd been drinking with his friends. We knew he was smoking pot. We were scared, vaping. He'd been in trouble with the law. We turned him into the police once. We called his probation officer, and she said, call the cops. And I know that did not go over well with him. He was not a fan of that move, and we were just trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we show this kid that we love him, but at the same time don't just be permissive about everything? And
I just think as a parent, those are, such hard decisions, because you want to do what's best for them, but it's that whole tough love and that feeling of, am I going to push them away even more by doing this? I can't even imagine being in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was rough.
That was rough. Really rough, and it was really hard when he decided to do that. I'd hoped that wasn't going to be his choice, but I gave him the choice, and he told some people that we kicked him out, which probably made him feel better, which wasn't true, but it was.
He was a badass.
Yeah, he's a badass. My parents kicked me out of the house. And he had a place to go live, and we were still communicating, and we were working out insurance stuff and all this. I was still paying for his cell phone. And he got a job, and he was going to school. He was having a really hard time getting up in the mornings, but he had some real good friends that were like pushing him along. And then,
if I can just interrupt
No,
for a
yeah,
second, I know
absolutely.
that I guess my question or the next thing I'm thinking, or maybe our listeners would think is, so what kind of do you think led up? Do you know if he was with his friends sort of experimenting and dabbling in using oxycodone, OxyContin pills, because you knew he would had the MIPs and he had been using marijuana, smoking. What was kind of the next step, or did you even know about it, or what happened?
We didn't until he talked to us and said one of his friends who he had been doing these pills with had gotten caught, and so he wanted to let us know because he didn't want it to hear it from them. He wanted to be the one to talk to us. So we sat in our kitchen and had a very normal, very good conversation about it. And I remember just being kind of in shock because I was usually up when he came home at night, and he never seemed to be anything. I mean, he was normal, like nothing. Yeah. And we had asked him, do you need to go to rehab? We will do what we need to do. And he was like, no, Mom, I'm not touching it anymore. He had a friend that passed from these drugs. And he was like, Mom, no, we're not, I'm not doing it anymore. And I believed him. And I think he really wasn't. I think there was something that triggered or something happened at that party that we just don't know that caused him to take a pill that took his life.
Did the parties with the pills, did they know what these were?
No. From what I understand, they thought they were taking Xanax or an Oxy is what the kids thought they were taking.
And it was like a handful of pills and everybody takes one and pops it.
Yeah.
And that was just what the kids in the community were doing. I mean, Tanner is the second death within a year of this in a fairly small school. And there's numerous kids who have overdosed who never went to the hospital or never got treatment, just kind of came out of it. I mean, it's something that was becoming a real problem in the community. I mean, kids were just they were just taking whatever, and I the thing is that when they did a toxicology on Tanner, and I had hoped that it wasn't fentanyl. They told me, the cop told me when I was there not to, because I was administering CPR, not to give him breaths. He said, you will, if he has any in his mouth, you could overdose on it. Which was when I started looking into what it was, because I'm like, a residue? How does that do anything?
Right.
And that was when I found out how powerful this was. I mean,
do you mind sort of sharing what happened with his passing? I mean, it wasn't like he took a whole handful of these things, was having a bad day, and took a whole mouthful of that with alcohol.
No, it was a normal day. He went to work, and after work, he came home, and then he left again with a friend, and somehow ended up at this party, which was normal. I mean, they're teenage kids in a small community. They're going to go and have a good time. And I don't know exactly what happened. What we know is because a lot of the kids aren't talking about that night, obviously. But what one of his friends did reach out to me and tell me what they usually did was they would just pour them in somebody's hand and they would each take one. But that Tanner had really not been participating in that. And so we don't really know exactly what happened, but there was something that happened that he ended up taking one of these pills. And then he ended up coming home.
But he talked to his sister after he came home.
Yeah, he talked to his sister.
And that was about 11:45 at night.
Yeah.
And basically just who was going to lock the door. We were already in bed. And
he seemed, appropriate to his sister. He wasn't like he was on a big high.
No, she said he seemed totally normal, like just a normal. Yeah, she didn't think anything of it at all.
And
but he had reached out. He had texted a friend.
He texted two friends that night. They didn't get the messages, but they have both told me they were strange messages. Like, one was, I need to come over. Something's going on.
I need a place to stay.
I need a place to stay, even though he was at home. And And the thought is that something didn't feel right. I mean, that's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it's speculation
Right.
at this point. And so Sunday morning, we were supposed to go to Dallas to, he wanted to buy a car. He gotten his license back from all the stuff that he was doing. He wanted to buy a car, and he'd taken money out for it. And I was up in the morning, and we did church online. And Charmin said, "Oh, you should go check on Tanner, see when he wants to go and look at this car." And I went into the room, and had some foam coming out of his mouth, and I knew something wasn't right, and I went over there and I grabbed him, and he was cold, and that's when I yelled for them to call 911, and that's when I started CPR at that point. We were told later by the medical examiner that he'd probably been gone for quite a while by the time that we had gotten to him. But they did find some pills in his wallet. And one of the interesting things about that is the guy told me that they tested it, and the part that they tested on it just came back as Tylenol. But obviously, he did die of an acute fentanyl overdose, and these were similar to pills that they'd seen around before with other kids, especially the one kid who had died had the same stuff.
Yeah, so I think it's important to clarify that for the listeners, because so if we kind of build the story, here's a kid who had issues. He's 18 who didn't have issues. I
Right.
mean, the kind of risk behaviors I was involved in, fortunately, weren't drugs, but we'd take all the doors off our cars and drive it around, and then we'd drive through high school fields, and I mean, this is in Canada. If we'd have got caught, I'd still be in jail. I'm not confessing to anything, but I mean, that's kind of and from what we've talked about before, I mean, he's a high sensation seeker, high sensation.
Yeah.
That's just the way that's the way he was built, and so obviously, it's fun to drink, it's fun to do these things, and he struggled with some mental health issues. There's no question of that either. But it's interesting. You look at this and he goes, okay, so this wasn't his drug of choice. This wasn't what we, at least what I was trained in medical school about. You expect people to get, heroin overdoses because they use more and more and more because they're chasing the high, and then they finally get the dose wrong, or they clean up and they go to a party 6 months later and they use half of what they used before. I mean, this isn't anything like that. I mean, for heaven's sakes, what he had in his wallet was Tylenol. That he thought was not Tylenol, because the way it's produced and distributed is they, make a tincture or whatever it is, or a solution of fentanyl, and literally spray it on Tylenol, and then distribute those as, hey, this is a Xanax, hey, this is an oxycodone, this is whatever. And, you get the wrong half of the pill.
Yeah.
And it's a fatal overdose. One time. One experiment.
Yeah.
You could be the kid that never did anything, never drank, nothing. You took one half of the wrong pill, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think for me is a struggle, is that when you lose a kid that gets, cause of death is an overdose. Like, Tanner is so much more than an overdose. He was my kid, and he still is my kid. And he loved life like no one. And he was so loving and so kind and non-judgmental. And that part is just, it takes one time, one bad decision or one impulsive decision, because Tanner was very impulsive. And I just don't want him to be labeled as a druggie, because this was not his typical, he made some bad decisions and he liked to have a good time. But like you said, who doesn't at 18, 19 years old? Like, we all have been there. This was not a pattern in his life. And that is just hard.
When you hear the word overdose too, like we've talked about in our previous show, but it's got all that connotations
Yes.
of a certain lifestyle or a certain person or a habit or, and this is a whole new phenomenon that's happening with this.
Yeah, because that wasn't Tanner.
No.
And that's not these kids. I mean, these kids who are doing it, that's not their life. Like, that's not who they are. But this is, I mean, it's taken 2 kids from our small little community just from wanting to have a good time with their friends.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, for the listeners, this is not like a suburb.
No.
This is a small,
Like 800 people town.
yeah, that where you've had 2 fatalities
Mhm.
and several overdoses,
Mhm.
just from kind of the regular party scene.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think, if you're judged with capital punishment for bad decisions as an 18-year-old male, there would be no human race.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And one of the things that we've I've kind of talked about some of the struggles that we had with Tanner, but Tanner he was the lead in the play at his school. He loved playing baseball. He loved wrestling. He struggled with his grades and wasn't able to do that. That depressed him when he wasn't able to participate in sports. But he was in a singing group at school, and he was
a good kid.
He was
a good kid.
In fact, he was forced to move home because of coronavirus, which ended up being a huge blessing. I mean, he was coming home for a couple weeks because that's how long this was going to last, right? And
14 days to
Right.
what, shallow the curve. or
Right.
whatever
yeah,
that's
once we
flatten
the curve, and then he was going to be on about his way, and he actually enjoyed being home. I mean, we were nowhere near the same as we were. He was 18 when he came home.
Mhm.
We expressed our concerns about certain things, asked him to keep it out of the house when it came to like drinking and smoking weed. He's got a younger brother and sister that we just wanted to keep it away from. But he loved he was going up and spending time with his little brother, which was something he hadn't done before. And we had a friend who saw him 3 days before Tanner passed, and he said, I've never seen him so happy. Like, he's happy to be home. He's happy to be with you guys. And the kid had plans. I mean, he had money in his wallet. We were going to buy a car, and he was going to finish school. He was so frustrated with online learning, but he was really, really trying to do it and trying to catch himself back up and get himself back to the place where he was, he wanted to graduate high school. I encouraged him so many times to go get his GED, and it was so important to him to get his high school diploma. Like, that was what he wanted to do. And he had plans, and he had a place he was going, and he took something that he thought was something else or whatever it was, and that was it.
Yeah, I know. When we were talking before, and I asked because he came home and it was during the coronavirus close down, how much of an impact all that upheaval in life kind of played a part in this. And I know it's kind of a mixed thing, right? Because things were going well because he was home with you and he had now that stable home environment again, and he was happy to be with you, and you guys had a good relationship going back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, still losing just the regular contacts of school and then, just the daily ins and outs of a routine there.
Well, you isolate. I mean, it was kind of like, I look at my kids at home. They're isolated.
Right.
There's nothing. I mean, slowly, the school district that we live in, the kids get to go to school 2 days a week. It's not enough. Like, these kids do not have anything. And Tanner, because he was 100 miles an hour, like, go, 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 he was stripped of everything. He was literally stuck at home, with nothing. And that, I think, he wanted to seek out, go to party, let's have some fun because life sucks right now.
Right. It's like any escape.
Yes. Anything to get, yes, absolutely.
Well, and the school had worked really hard to make sure that they fit a profile and they were going to be able to start school in September. And Tanner was really excited about being able to go there and do that. And then it all got canceled and wasn't able to happen. And I've never seen him so angry. He was
so
just like
angry.
He's like, it's like they don't understand that I'm not going to be able to finish high school this way. And he was so frustrated with the whole situation. But he buckled down and he worked. But he was going out. He would work and then he would go out with his friends because he needed to be around people. He he wanted an outlet so much. And you could see that he was doing better than he had been, but he was still, it was still just a struggle. It was just a struggle to, I see it in our other kids too. It's a struggle.
We see it with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really tough to say the least. And, even just the sports,
Mm-hmm.
Especially for young men, it's like, my goodness, they need to be out there running around and burning off. That's, I had this conversation with a patient literally 2 days ago, and I said, here's the deal. You're going to deal with your life and the struggles you have in your life constructively or destructively. That's the only two choices you get. And that's just kind of really how life is, and so bad things happen or people get stressed and then they become, ultra marathon runners, largely constructive. Some people become alcoholics. Some people become heroin addicts. Some people become missionaries,
Yeah.
like we do, you're going to do, there's always an outlet. And sometimes it's illness, people get really sick because they're stressed. And that's just the way, this idea that somehow you can push the pause button on life is completely insane. Life does not work that way. There's no pause button. And especially with young people, young, intense, I'm a high sensation seeker. I know what it's like. Motorcycles, parachutes, all those good things in life.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. You take those outlets away. What are you going to go to? Look at how the booze industry has exploded since COVID because you're sitting at home bored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, and I think that is what, probably made this issue explode around here anyway, was just, they didn't have anything else to do. And they were with their friends and their friends were doing it and that kind of thing. One of the things that will always be the most confusing part of this is one of Tanner's friends told me, he said, I told Tanner at one point, either do drugs with me or we can't be friends. And he said, and Tanner walked away from our friendship. He said, I've seen it kill too many people. I've seen too many people who have been hurt by this, and I don't like it, and I don't like it. And that has been what people have said to me over and over again. His friends are just like, this is not real. This is not possible. And so that's why I think, because Tanner had hit his head really hard at work the week before, and there was part of me that was hoping that he had a brain injury, that something had happened there. And so even though they told us when they were there, and when the police officer called me and told me that it was acute fentanyl overdose, that just...
It doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right. It just didn't make sense, just with what everyone was telling us. And, people who knew Tanner really well were just like, this is... And I guess that points to the fact that it's only takes one time. It's
and
not
that
a
it can
building
happen
thing.
to anybody. I think, like we talked about, what you think of the normal addict, that was not Tanner. And I think, this literally could happen to anybody. You think you're taking something for fun and it could take your life. This could happen to anybody, any family. We're just your average, American family, small town. And it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like this should happen to us, but it did.
Right. Yeah. It's not, like what you expect. It's like, it's rock star stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
The guy, the fifth time you flunk out of rehab, it's like, yeah, well, I guess Lane Staley's going to die.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Oh, surprise, surprise. And if I can stress anything as far as, even like a kind of a clinical point to the physicians listening is that, I grew up in the 70s and 80s and, it was Ronald Reagan, with Nancy Reagan, just say no. And, you say just say no to teenagers and that you might as well just say, it might as well be the just say yes campaign.
Exactly.
Right. It's like putting those ridiculous parental advisory stickers on albums. What album are you going to buy? I'm never going to buy another album unless it has the parental advisory sticker.
Those are the ones I bought. Yeah.
Yeah. Exclusively. And so, but the fact is that, I mean, it sounds incredibly trite, but it is just say no. It's like if you're at a party and you brought a case of beer that you bought yourself, and it's with you and always with you, you know exactly what you're getting into.
Right.
If there's the handful of pills you're describing going around, all bets are off. One use, and that's all it takes.
Yep.
Well, and it's so different than it was, 10 years ago. I mean, or 15 years ago. I mean, I'm not admitting to anything either, but I may have taken a Vicodin when I didn't need it, a prescription pill and that's what, it was.
I may have taken someone's Vicodin that wasn't. I mean, I'll admit it, but as a doctor, I confess. But I mean, now.
Yeah, but not recreational.
Not recreationally, no.
You had a headache, or you lived with a headache that required medication.
Yes, correct.
There was a reason. Let's just say
yes,
there was
not
a reason.
recreationally.
Yeah.
Now, when I was young and dumb and in university years, I used some recreational substances that were going around. And of course, that was like back in the 80s. Times were way different. But it's frightening when you just, you just see the wheel keep turning and, like, you just think, okay, I'm borrowing a Vicodin from somebody because like I have this severe headache or knee pain and I trust that it maybe is okay. I mean, that's, maybe a stretch to going, to party with pills, but still these kids are, they just think, oh, this is, just some Vicodin that they got
or Xanax.
Right. Or Xanax that they stole from grandma's house. I mean, even black market weed. Like we live in a weed legal state. So you go to a dispensary, you buy it. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the stuff has gone through a chromograph. They know exactly how much of everything's in it.
Right.
But you're buying black market weed. So you're getting, stems and leaves. It's total crap. And they just spray it with K2 or spice. So you have absolutely, I mean, that'll kill you.
Yeah.
And, it's not to obviously condone all those decisions, but it's still, the fact that it just takes one and being naive to now anything that's out there, you just can't trust what it is, but where it's come from.
And Tanner, in a way, I mean, I hate to say this, but he was in a way educated. Like he had the thing on his cell phone that would like tell him what pill it was. So, I mean, he could look at it and be like, oh, I'm taking a Xanax, or oh, I'm taking an Oxy, or oh, I'm taking a Percocet, or whatever it was. He had that. Like, so in a way he was educated.
Should have been a bit of a red flag when he told me, oh no, that's a trazodone.
Yeah.
Because he found it in the floor.
But that's even more frightening.
Right,
the
because
fact
they
that
think they know.
These things are labeled as being, right, exactly.
Yeah, they press
think
them
they're
to
safe,
look like...
so to speak.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that it could, it's a Tylenol, so whoopee-doo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I know.
I want to know how you guys are doing. If you could share that with everybody and what these last few months have been like for you.
Well, they've been hell. I'll just be honest.
It's actually 4.5 months exactly today.
No parent should ever have to bury their child. And there's something about this just more tragically, I think. I don't know, maybe not, but I feel like in my heart, if it would have been like a car accident or something, that maybe I could accept it a little bit more. But because of how tragic this was, it's just been hell. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, there's days that I feel like I'm doing good and I'm laughing with my other children. And then there's days where I cannot get out of bed because I don't want to do life without him. Because he's supposed to still be here. And it's hard. So I think, I mean, we're surviving. That's basically the only thing I know how to tell people when they ask. I'm like, we're surviving. Like, we're surviving. But it is, it's tragic. And it's hell. I don't even have any other words to describe it.
Yeah. I get to spend a weekend with him and his cousin and his uncle at the coast, like August. We went over, got a room and stuff over there and got to talk. I mean, just having a good time. And so, it was so unexpected. I mean, I think that had he been sick or had it been a car accident or something like that, there's part of it. I mean, the way that it happened, I think, has made it more difficult in a lot of ways. But it, it's it's really a day by day thing. Most of the time, more times than not these days. Those first 2 months were the worst. Can go on about life and work and kind of take care of stuff, but I do find myself, I drive past the cemetery. I drive past the road to the cemetery every day on my way home from work, and I'll have weeks where I'll go out there 3 times just because I need to go out there and be by his grave, and that's always really, really hard. And I don't know what that compulsion is all the time, and other times it's more fine. But yeah, we have we've had a lot of really great people around us. We've had kind of a couple people who have experienced grief in their own way recently that have been just huge. Huge for us as well. Just being able to relate to that, just that unexpected loss, it has been really helpful for me anyway. And we're kind of starting to look at, I think we're going to do the Grieving Parents seminar this weekend. It's online. You can't be around anybody, but we're gonna do kind of start some of that stuff, which we haven't really done that much of. One of the ways that I passed the first 2 months was I read the book Fentanyl-The a couple times, like just because I wanted to know as much as I could about what this stuff was, and use that as a distraction some. But we are surviving. Yeah, I think that's the best way. That's the best way to put it, and not like with our heads barely above water. We are our family has grown closer, and we have something for ourselves that nobody else has. Is that we lost a son and our kids lost a brother, and that's something that is a bond for us forever. So,
well, it's good to hear that it's been drawing you together rather than the alternative, because these kind of tragedies blow families up all the time.
Yeah.
So that, at least as friends, is good to hear. If there was anything that you were gonna to leave with the listeners, as far as how do you because like you said, you had some struggles with Tanner as far as talking to him about smoking weed and drinking and all the rest of that. Is there anything that you would leave as like, hey, just talk to your kids about this, or because like you said, you read that book Fentanyl-The twice just to kind of get a gauge, because until this happened to you, you really didn't have a clue of the severity or the intensity, or the fact that half of one pill that was actually born a Tylenol could potentially, kill a robust 18-year-old.
Yeah, I'm going to throw myself under the bus here. I'm very naive. I understand and live in my little 800 800 people town. But I really thought, I knew what fentanyl was to some extent, but I really felt like it was something that was in LA, or, I didn't think that this was something that would be happening in my small hometown. Like, I just did not know. And I think the biggest thing for me is just be aware, parents. Like, this is happening right here. It's happening with our kids in our small towns. It's literally everywhere. And just, I think have a conversation with your kids, because you never know. And it's not just some big thing in a different state or something. It's right here, and it's taking our kids' lives, and it needs to stop.
I would say also importantly is educate yourself about it. Find out, understand how powerful fentanyl is compared to morphine or heroin. Understand that it's measured in micrograms when it's administered medically, not milligrams, and that it is a extremely potent, powerful drug. And then understand that it's not going to stop showing up because it's manufactured legally around the world, and that it will continue to be a problem. And so educating yourselves and educating your kids, this isn't about getting kids to stop doing drugs. This is about getting kids to not kill themselves on drugs without any knowledge of what they're even doing. Like, that's the point is that this is something that people need to spend time learning about, and they need to share this information with their kids. I mean, it's uncomfortable. Like, talking about sex with your kids is uncomfortable, but it's something that's really important and can change the trajectory of a life. Just understanding. I mean, how many kids would not take something if they knew it had the potential to kill them? Mm-hmm. I mean, it wouldn't stop everyone, but it would stop a lot of them if they knew. I have no idea whether this will kill me or not.
Yeah. Really well said. I mean, those are just until recently. Even myself as a doctor was just like, what's going on? How's fentanyl getting in street drugs or common everyday stuff? So totally agree that parents just need to be aware, but doctors, the medical community need to like wake up because it's happening everywhere. Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's the analogs. I mean, it's not just fentanyl; it's carfentanil, which is 10,000 times per dose more potent than morphine. Like that. We throw this stuff. You just hear the word fentanyl, but it's all the analogs, and then it's all the novel analogs that they make out of the base molecule. Because you can export the base compounds that it's never been tested on anything.
Yeah. Well, and you suspect that your kid's doing something, and so you go to Walmart and buy a drug test to try and test him, and it's not going to show up. You're not going to find it. You're not going to see something from the stuff that they're taking. It doesn't show up on those sorts of things.
Right. And you expect, if Johnny's doing something wrong, and he comes home drunk and pukes in the middle of the night, you go, well, he probably drank too much. Or he's been smoking a bunch of weed and his eyes are red. He doesn't want to get out of bed and his grades suffer and all that. There's at least some warning. There's some escalation.
Yes.
There's some, this, you can be the kid that like literally walked off the Amish compound, decided to, go to one party, took half of one pill, and that was the end of the story. And I mean, that's not even hyperbolic. I mean, that's not even an exaggeration.
Right.
No, it's not. And that's just what I want people to understand, is that you need to educate yourselves. It's not like it was, like I said before, 20 years ago, where someone's stealing prescription pills from their mom's drawer and sharing them with their friends. It's not like that. That's not what's going on anymore. And it's, I think the third wave of opiate addiction.
Yep.
And it is by far the deadliest. I mean, it is just.
I mean, it can't really get any worse than this, right?
No.
I mean, this is it.
No, and that's and that's the thing too, is that we understand. I mean, Tanner was he's obviously very important to us, but Tanner is an 18-year-old in a town in Oregon. But this is happening all over, everywhere. I mean, it springs up in places, and then and they have huge issues with it, and it's been happening for the last 8 to 10 years, starting at raves and stuff like that, just because they can't make Xanax the way they used to, and they can't get it the way they used to, and they can't get oxys the way they used to. So, but the demand is still there, so they have to create something.
Yeah, if you figure out the pill to take away the demand for drugs and, drinking something to make yourself feel better, then, you'll win multiple Nobel Prizes. But
no kidding.
No one's been able to figure that one out in 8,000 years,
right.
So I'm not holding my breath.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thank you, guys. I mean, this is heavy stuff.
Thank you both so much for being here, just taking the time to open up and share with everybody.
Yeah.
It's like huge, and we love you and totally appreciate you being here and being vulnerable and just helping educate everybody and putting yourselves out there, because
thanks for the opportunity. I mean, it's something that I feel really strongly about, just want to know, like, what can I do so that no other mom has to go through this? And this is a way to just get it out there.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Yep.
All right. So look us up at bsfreemd.com, email doc@bsfreemd.com, and as always, we'll see you next Thursday.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit, uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.